We've seen the alpha male archetype everywhere: the boss who demands total submission, the athlete who intimidates his teammates, and the influencer who preaches that life is a constant battle for dominance. This behavior is almost always defended with a single biological claim: that this is how wolf packs survive in the wild. But the specific scientific observations used to build this entire worldview were never actually conducted on wolves in their natural habitat. The data trail leads back to 1947 and a Swiss animal behaviorist named Rudolf Schenkel. To study the sociology of the wolf, Schenkel observed a group at the Basel Zoo. These weren't a natural group. They were unrelated adults from different sources, forced together by humans, in a space measuring just 10 by 20 meters. The animals were unable to escape one another. They paced erratically and fought constantly for resources. Schenkel watched a top-ranking male and female emerge through physical repression of their peers, and he labeled them the alphas. Schenkel was actually documenting the behavioral breakdown of animals in a high-stress environment, similar to a prison yard. However, he published his findings as the natural standard for the species, creating a misunderstanding that would persist for decades. In the late 1960s, a young biologist named L. David Mech set out to write the definitive synthesis of wolf biology. At the time, studying free-roaming packs was nearly impossible, so Mech relied on the most prominent literature available, the work of Rudolf Schenkel. Mech published The Wolf in 1970. It was an instant success, presenting the alpha pair and their struggle for dominance as a scientific fact. With over 120,000 copies in circulation, it became the primary reference for almost every other book, documentary, and study that followed. The terminology traveled far beyond the scientific community. By the 1990s, business leaders, pickup artists in nightclubs, and loud motivational speakers had adopted the alpha as the biological ideal for human leadership and romantic attraction. A well-intentioned scientist had accidentally provided the biological justification for a culture that prizes aggression and bullying as natural leadership traits. In 1986, Mech began a long-term study on Ellesmere Island in the Canadian high Arctic. This was a pristine laboratory where the wolves had no fear of humans and lived entirely on their own terms, free from any confinement. For 13 summers, Mech lived alongside a wild pack. He was often only a few feet away, watching them hunt, sleep, and raise their young without the use of cages or artificial constraints. As he gathered thousands of hours of data, he noticed something that contradicted everything he had previously written. The wolves weren't fighting for rank. There were absolutely no violent dominance contests between members of the pack. The violent hierarchies Schenkel saw in 1947 were the direct result of the Enclosure. In the vastness of the wild, where wolves can simply walk away from a conflict, the prison yard behavior disappeared entirely. Mech realized a wolf pack is simply a family unit of parents and offspring. Young wolves don't fight for control. They eventually disperse, leaving their parents to find mates and start families elsewhere. Calling a parent wolf an alpha provides no more information than calling a human parent an alpha over their toddler. They are simply parents guiding their children through a natural division of labor. The core premise of Mech's 1970 bestseller had been dismantled. The top dog model used to define the identity of millions of people was biologically non-existent in the wild. In 1999, Mech published a landmark paper in the Canadian Journal of Zoology to officially correct the record. He argued that the term alpha was misleading because it implies a status won through competition, which he had never seen in 13 years on Ellesmere Island. He spent the next 20 years on a personal crusade, begging the University of Minnesota Press to stop printing his 1970 book so that he could stop spreading outdated information. But the book was a bestseller, and the publisher refused to stop. To bypass them, Mech wrote mainstream articles and filmed videos pleading with the public to stop using the term. The scientific method had performed exactly as intended, using new data to self-correct a previous mistake. But the cultural myth had already taken such a deep root that it refused to die. There is a final irony for anyone who still identifies as an alpha male. They aren't modeling their behavior on the apex predators of the wild. They are modeling it on the stressed-out, erratic behavior of zoo animals in a cage. In nature, the true leaders are cooperative. They lead through experience and caregiving, avoiding unnecessary conflict to keep their families alive. David Mech successfully found the biological truth, only to spend the rest of his life watching the world prefer his mistakes.